Welcome to another Big Daddy D adventure. Today we're going to be building a zero clearance jig or fence for my miter saw. The goal of this jig is to prevent tear out on the back and the bottom of my boards whenever I'm cutting them on my chop saw. In some of my recent projects you may have seen that I've had to do quite a bit of sanding to clean up the ends of my boards after they splinter when I use my chop saw. So, well, let's get started. Let's start chopping some wood and let's fix this problem. This jig is pretty straightforward. Essentially all there is a table and a fence. The table I'm making out of 1/2 inch plywood, and then the fence I'm going to go ahead and make out of 3/4 inch plywood. Just making it thick enough to where when I screw it to the bottom board or the table board that there's some meat to bite into with those screws. And then to mount this to the table saw, there's actually 4 holes that I'm going to put into the fence to allow it to be held in place so it doesn't move around. Since I want the fence to sit on top of the table, what I did is I just drew 2 lines here, one for the edge of the board and then one for the center of the board for that 3/4 inch fence to sit on top of this. Then I'm just marking out a couple holes, and then I have a spring-loaded punch that works really good, real nice. And then after I mark all the holes, I'll drill countersink the heads, and then we'll start to screw it together. Although I've already drilled and countersunk the screw or the holes in the board, I went ahead and ran the pilot drill after I had everything clamped together. That way I can drill it into the fence, make sure it's not going to shift around on it. Probably didn't need it. It's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood, and this is a I think number 10 screw, so probably wouldn't have split it, but it's just a little extra insurance on that. Run that pilot screw or pilot drill through it one more time before I finish screwing it together. On my table saw, I had 4 holes that were in the existing fence, and I'm going to use those 4 holes to hold this jig in place. My thought is I only needed 2, but I also had an idea of making an extended fence maybe in the future, and that's why I went ahead and marked all 4, and then I'll drill out all 4 so I have some future expansion opportunities. So on my mount, what I'm going to do is use some T-nuts, and the T-nuts are going to be on the front face of the fence. So what I'm having to do here is run a pilot drill through the wood. Then what I'm going to do is flip the board over and then do the Forstner bit from the front. That way I can use that pilot drill hole as the center for the Forstner bit. And then I'll flip it back over and then actually drill it out for the 1/4 inch bolts that I'm going to be using. So for now, I'm only going to use the 2 center holes with the T-nuts. So I'll just tap the 2 nuts in, and then I'll be able to bolt it from the back, and it'll hold that fence on. And then the other 2 I'll be using in the future for those expansions. Well, I wanted something a little bit more convenient than pulling out my ratchets and wrenches every time I need to move this thing around. So I went ahead and designed up a handle for these bolts to screw into that board. So worked out pretty good. I was able to get the handles long enough to where I could spin them from the backside, and then just printed it on my 3D printer and put them together. Worked out good. One of the key things about those handles is I wanted it to be long enough to where it stuck out behind the base so I could actually spin it. This one here on the end was specifically hard because it was real tight to get a handle in there. And then again, all the T-nuts are flush and the bolts are locked in, so it's ready to cut. Well, it's ready for the first cut. Now this is the part that makes it zero clearance. So before there was no cut, now there is one cut, and that board will be locked into place and held into place by those bolts every time. So the kerf that goes through that base and the fence are the same width as the board. So now there's nowhere for those splinters to develop, and worked out great. Cut a number of different pieces here, and every cut came out clean on the front and on the back. So I would call this a success. Well, thanks for coming out on another workshop project adventure with me today. As usual, if you like what you saw, give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to go on more project adventures with me, hit the subscribe button. As always, take care. Bye-bye.